Hello, good morning. Today our guest is Annie Holmquist. Hello, Annie. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. How about you?
I'm great, Annie. So Annie is the editor of Chronicles magazine, and I love her articles. And basically, she's my boss. Yes, she's a really excellent editor, and she often improves my pieces. I like your editing style, Annie.
Oh, thank you.
So Annie, you are a contributor and editor at Chronicles. I love Chronicles. I love Paul Gottfried. I love you. I love the foreign policy analyst, but I can't pronounce his name. It's stuck.
Surgeon Trish.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
But you guys are just so smart. It's so unfortunate that you don't have the audience that the National Review believes that it deserves.
Well, it's growing all the time.
Yeah, that's what Paul said, that you're expanding. But I think the problem, Annie, is not necessarily money, but the real right, the right that is represented by Paul Gottfried needs a young and hippie person because people like entertainment, so they need a young and hippie person. This individual doesn't need to be smart, just young and hip, and then he can lead people to Paul, the foreign policy analyst, and you. So, and Annie, we have written several articles. We plan to talk about politics, masculinity, and the church. But you just keep popping out these interesting pieces. So, like recently, I saw one you wrote, "Say yes to the dress." Why would a man want to say yes to the dress?
Yeah, so that was in Chronicles recently. And it was kind of talking about, it was on a New York Times article where it was talking about how men are starting to sport dresses. And, you think about this a lot with maybe the transgender movement and everything, but these were actual heterosexual men saying, hey, I want to wear a dress. And I look at that and think, this is a sign of our messed up culture where women are becoming more masculine and the bold, the brash, we're going to lead in the corporate boardroom and everything. And then the men, on the other hand, are like, oh, we're just going to be the soft, nurturing, effeminate, let's wear the dresses and everything. And it just shows our society is turned upside down.
But Annie, what's interesting is that women have a greater preference to form family than men, and on average, women actually like masculine men.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and I think there is kind of this feminine, or I should say feminism mentality in women, and they think that, oh, I should go out for the job. I should make sure I have a successful career, and we'll just leave family and children behind, and that's not as important. But I get the sense many women are just misled. They've been told this, but deep down inside, a lot of them really would be very happy taking care of a family and raising children, and they don't realize how fulfilling that can be. And they just think they have to double time and have both a career and a family, and then in the end, they end up being exhausted and worn out.
It is called the paradox of female unhappiness, and researchers have actually studied the topic. Despite the rise of women, they're not necessarily getting happier.
Yes, and I mean, a bit ago, they're being asked to do two jobs, and who is going to be happy when they're so exhausted and trying to do an excellent job at both things? You're not. You're going to be torn apart, and nobody's going to be happy.
But Annie, are you married?
I'm not.
Oh,
No, I would love to be, but that's not. I guess what God has for me. So I am encouraging other people to, have families and everything like that. I enjoy children very much. So.
and furthermore, Annie, children need their parents, both parents, but women are responsible for socializing children. And I have known this since I was relatively young, that there is a positive relationship between staying at home and academic success. Children tend to do better when their moms are at home.
Yes. And I had that situation, very blessed to have that, where my father wanted my mom to stay home. She wanted to stay home and raise myself and my sister. And that was such a blessing in my life that she was there. She also homeschooled my sister and I, actually when it's very early. And that turned out to be so wonderful, and it made me realize how wonderful it is for mothers to be there for their children, to be nurturing them, to be teaching them, and just modeling a very good, happy home life for them.
And back to your point, the masculinization of women, there are some studies showing a link between transgenderism and aggressive traits and autism. So I'm not necessarily diminishing transgender people or how they feel, but the truth is that many of these individuals are having psychological problems.
I don't know a ton about that,
Yeah.
but yes, I think sometimes the transgenderism stems from deeper issues where, they had difficulties in their past, which is very tragic. And so they're searching for some answers. And unfortunately, society is pushing other ones that probably are going to make them more miserable in the end.
Yeah, and counseling is so important for such people. I'm not exaggerating trans suicide, but I read an article in a British publication once, and the researcher was saying that after transitioning, some persons may want to detransition. So, for example, a man may want to return to his original state to become no, sorry, you get what I'm saying.
Yes.
It's really confusing. So a trans woman would want to return to her original state to become a man.
Yes. And, and there are a number of stories, and you have to dig for them because this doesn't seem to be very popular in the media, that a lot of people after they transition say, this isn't fulfilling. This wasn't what I thought it was going to be. In fact, I'm more miserable and I want to just go back. And I've heard different stories of those people who have done that. And they're just like, why didn't somebody tell me, and they didn't give me the information. I was just pushed into this. And so that's very tragic that our medical world is not really listening to these people, not really giving them the truth that they probably need to hear, but instead pushing this more political agenda on them to use them as tools almost.
So for example, Annie, you're a religious person like myself, and do you believe that these crises are a consequence of our loss of faith in God?
Oh, definitely. I think it's, that's very much when people turn away from God. Again, we're talking about fulfillment in our different roles, but the thing that we're going to be fulfilled with most is our relationship with God. And when we are not pursuing that, when that's not important in society, people are obviously going to, let's try this for fulfillment, let's try that for fulfillment.
Nihilism.
It's just, there's nothing left really for them. And so they try everything else and nothing makes them happy. So it's very tragic. I feel bad for these people.
But we know the data on religion. Religious people are report higher levels of happiness. They're more likely to volunteer. They express greater meaning in life. And there's also a correlation between national nihilism and declining beliefs. So for example, transcendental beliefs like religion, nationalism, etc.
Yeah, so I mean, definitely the kind of religion I think does add to that, and all is really pushed back to that one thing. And if people would look to the Lord, I think our lives would be much happier and more fulfilled.
But however, Annie, we're making quite obvious claims. But why are people refusing to appreciate the data? It is not counterintuitive to argue that religion is essential to meaning in life. Even atheists love to talk about meaning in life. If you don't believe in God, okay, argue that life can be purposeful, but is it meaningful? And if you do not believe in God, why do you want to live a meaningful life or a life that has intrinsic meaning?
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, one of the articles that you had mentioned you were interested in discussing is I was talking about the religious nuns, and those are the NONES. They're the people who claim no affiliation with any religion, and those people have risen. They made up about 5% of the American population in 1970, and they have gone to 25% in recent years. So, people are drifting away from it. And I think in some senses, that is probably, the Christian church is partially to blame because we have watered it down so much. We're not teaching true biblical religion, and people aren't interested in that. And so the church really needs to get back, not trying to make people more comfortable in life, but if they actually get back to the true roots, then that's where I would think there would be more revival of religion and faith in God.
Yes, Annie, tell us about that article you wrote on the relationship between masculinity and the Christian church.
Yeah, so I thought this was interesting. I was looking at an article that Anthony Askland had written for Chronicles back in February, and it was an excellent article. I loved it so much. He made so many good points. But he was talking about effeminate Christianity, and this is a topic I really thought about over the years as well. Like I said, and he said too, the church has gotten very effeminate, where no longer are we talking about, like you mentioned, we're not singing hymns where soldiers of Christ arise, or rise up, O men of God. And that is a very biblical point of view, where you have even the Apostle Paul talking about putting on the armor of God. There's these warlike analogies, or competition, fighting the good fight, or running the race, the Christian race. And so those are very masculine concepts. When people say that, oh, Christianity is just this soft, kind, nurturing religion, yes, there is that aspect to it, but you have to have that aspect and balance it with the masculine side of it too, where we are Christian soldiers. We are called to fight for the Lord. And when you take that out of the Christian church, I think that is one of the reasons why people have been falling away, and especially men in particular, because they're not interested in something that's going to be feminine or soft. Like, and you're saying what's the point? And that's not true Christianity when you take that aspect out. So if we were actually promoting true Christianity, we'd probably see more interest in faith again.
Annie, I agree with you. Christianity is a religion, a doctrine. It's not just a way of life. What's the point arguing that Christianity is a way of life or a worldview? It's a strict doctrine. So, for example, if the Bible does not permit fornication and you're fornicating, you're not a Christian. And Christianity is like a lifestyle belief.
It is, definitely. Yeah, and we're called to be separate and to follow the Lord, and it's a challenging thing. But if you look at the things through history too, it was at the times when things were difficult that people were following after Christianity, saying, yes, this is worthwhile. And if we water Christianity down, like we do in the modern church, there's no purpose in it. So why would people bother to go after it?
Like, I don't know if you're familiar with this trend, Annie, but there are pastors, especially in Europe, who don't believe in God.
Pastors that don't believe in God?
Yes, you cannot be a pastor if you're an atheist. And this is one of the big problems I'm having with the church and with conservatism. I don't believe in big tentism. It doesn't make much sense.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I don't believe in big tentism.
Okay.
It doesn't make much sense. It's either you're a Christian and conservative or you're not. Yeah. So I don't know if you are following the story, but I just discovered it recently because I don't pay much attention to Turning Point USA. But apparently the group invited a porn star to speak and then canceled her. Some nonsense like that. I just discovered it like a few days ago.
Really? No, I am not really surprised that maybe there would be pastors out there saying like, oh, I don't believe in God. And I know that there are many people who are watering down, Christianity or different things. In fact, I saw a documentary recently where I was talking to a Jewish person. And they were saying like, oh yeah, I don't really believe in God or these miracles that really happened in the Old Testament, but I still practice the Jewish religion. And the same thing works for Christianity. Like, what's the point if you don't believe in the foundational principles of that religion and faith? Then why bother?
Mm. But Annie, how do we embrace the nihilism of modern life? Because we're having a conversation. We're both Christians and conservatives, and most people today don't share our views. And based on what we have been saying, our points are quite obvious, but we cannot drill in the message. I'm just confused. Why can't people see the obvious?
Well, I think it is a part of the times that we live in. I mean, I think many people would say that we seem like we're in the last days, and it talks about that people will fall away. The important thing I think for us is to continue to make sure our lives are following what God says, that we are walking in His ways and staying separate from the world and just doing what He commands us to, and so and nurturing up our own families, being good influences to those around us, and that's really all we can do is to just be faithful ourselves. And in being faithful, I think we will attract other people to the gospel.
I agree. Now, Annie, we can talk about your article about manly fathers. Do children prefer masculine fathers?
I would think so. I mean, I found this very interesting, this study that came out, and I also found it amusing because the researchers seemed very surprised at the findings that they had in it, because it showed that, let's see, it was um, the stereotypical masculine characteristics like competitiveness, being daring, adventurous, dominant, aggressive, courageous, standing up to pressure. Those were all positive traits, and the fathers who demonstrated these were rated as showing good parenting behavior. So I thought that's very fascinating to see the traditional role of a father being held up as, hey, this is actually good parenting. And you don't hear that so much in society. That's usually the opposite. But here, even a study is coming out saying that's the case.
But Annie, recently, the Wilcox, who's
Mhm.
affiliated to the Institute for Family Studies, did a study showing that Black boys who were raised by their fathers do better than their working class peers. So we do know that fathership, that being a father is linked to success in later life. And
Yeah.
monogamy is also important to Annie. But why is there a war on monogamy? People are saying that they're polyamorous, celebrating promiscuity. What's going on?
I mean, if I want to go back to the Christian culture and everything, it's sin, and I think it's definitely Satan working overtime to destroy the family because he knows that it's such a key um, breeding ground for faith, for right living, and when that's the thing we want to take down if it is so successful. Just if you destroy that, then everything else goes. And I think that's one of the things that we really need to, if you want to create a positive vision, things are in such chaos right now. But if you want to create a positive vision, one of the best things I think that you can do is start to focus directly on the two-parent family, encouraging couples to stay together, encouraging them to have children, encouraging them to bring them up, raise them in faith, to know the Lord, to raise them to have a good education, and to raise them up not just to be just people who go out and push forward, but to really make a difference in this world and be a bright light.
And as a parent, you are obligated to instruct your children properly. In other words, if your son is a boy, raise him as a boy.
Yes, definitely.
You can
So often, parents tend to push aside, especially when you have both parents working in the workforce. It's easy, well, I don't have time, let's bring them to daycare, let's put them in school, let's do that. And your primary responsibility as a parent is to raise your children up. That's it's so worthwhile. I think parents overlook it and think, oh, I just need to have a good career and have a job. That's wonderful, but if you are losing your children, I mean, if you invest in them and raise them up to be good citizens, good godly citizens, that will make such a difference, and it impacts only not today our world, but eternity as well.
And Annie, we must respond to those who will not take our view seriously. So on this show, I am not in the business of imposing my doctrines on other people. But if you're going to critique Christianity, do it properly. The rule of law emerged in the Christian church. So there's a modern belief that, oh, Christianity is this ancient religion and it has not contributed much to society. This is not true. We created the West. So I'm just putting this out there for those who are saying, oh, look at those two Christian clones. They don't know what they're talking about. Well, family law was influenced by the medieval church. So was civil law. So was equity. So yes, we are right in many regards. Actually, Annie, I recently interviewed someone, and he's not a, I do not believe that he's religious, but he did a study with a co-author, and they argued that Christianity is a better predictor it's a better predictor for protecting human rights than even cognitive ability.
Yeah.
And these are scientists.
I was having a conversation like this with somebody yesterday, and he was talking about how, I think the example he used was African tribes, and how they would have slavery and war against each other, and when one tribe would conquer the other, even the women would be extremely cruel and take the babies of the other tribe and throw them up and land them on spears. And we were just talking about how Christianity changed that, where it came in and had, like you were saying, the rule of law, how we respond to people.
And then there's also the broader era of literacy. Robert Woodbury has done some studies on the topic. Churches promoted schools, they built institutions, and they taught people how to read irrespective of their social class.
Yeah.
So we have to defend Christianity because the naysayers are plentiful and quite arrogant. Yeah, they get up and say, we can have human rights without Christianity. Well, that's quite obvious, but human dignity and human rights are different variables.
Yeah.
What really is dignity? Because we're Christian, we contend that dignity is based on Christ. In other words, it is unmerited. But the Kantian version of rights and dignity is earned. In order to express rights, one needs to be a rational creature. So if we're following it to its logical conclusion, then the disabled don't have much dignity. We only respect them because of their potential to act like us. Had it not been for their disability, they would have been able to reach at a higher level. But naturally, the Christian concept of dignity is more persuasive than the secular concept. This is just my opinion.
Yes, because we're all created in the image of God. Yeah.
And this makes us quite powerful. But Annie, we're on the family, and on May 5th, 2021, you wrote a piece. Don't look to school to improve children's reading. Homeschooling is becoming popular, and I mentioned in this piece, Annie, because the home can teach us stuff that the school cannot. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, definitely. I'm a huge proponent of that, especially since I saw it in my own home. And as you mentioned, reading, I found reading myself as a child that opened up so much for me. It was kind of my entertainment more because we didn't really have much TV in our home. But I learned so much from it. I even remember I picked up vocabulary from it. My mom, one time we were doing spelling and it was some word and she's like, I said, oh, that means this. And she didn't even know what it meant. And she's like, how did you know what that meant? And I said, oh, I thought reading, and I picked it up from the context. So I think it's such a valuable thing. If parents, I always say a lot of times, parents are so worried, and this is so natural too, but they're so worried that they will not be able to teach their child well, or they'll fail them or let them down. And I think so much, if people will just teach their children to read well and instill a love of reading in them, that opens up a whole world for children, because if they love reading, then they will love learning a lot of times and they will just take off. So that's one thing I encourage parents, if they just teach their children how to read and how to read well and how to love it, then you're great. You're doing great. And I mean, of course, there are other things too, but you would definitely set them on the path to success.
I'm curious, Annie, what did you study?
In college,
Yes.
yes, my degree was actually in biblical studies. So,
Biblical studies.
yes.
Wow. So, what era of biblical studies?
It was just I would say probably just a broad overview. So it covered some theology, covered Christian history, different things like that.
All right. So, Annie, I'm going to ask a question in relation to your studies. How important is community and civic life?
And civic life, oh, I think it's very important. And I think that is one of the things that we've had difficulty with over the years. Especially, I think we've seen this with COVID happening, as we have been secluded from each other so much. I've really sensed this in so many aspects that people have just been lonely. And in the world, I mean, in some ways that was a good aspect of COVID that it showed us, because in some ways we were so busy running around that it got exhausting to be with people, but we weren't really spending time and nurturing relationships. That though is a great thing, I think, to do. And it just that is one of the big problems in our society today, because we no longer have the community of church because many people aren't going. And also our neighborhoods. We don't know our neighbors very well. I mean, I can speak to that myself. I do know some people and we wave, but on a deeper level, it's harder to get that. So I think it does it creates, I believe, the thing that we've lost in our society, and I think that was one of America's very successful things, was because it was on all these little communities that we had.
Little platoons.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Little platoons.
Yeah, yes, little platoons. Because they gave you a connection to something. You weren't so, the little islands that we are now. You had worth to people, and also you have a lot of chance to discuss things and get ideas across. That's one thing today. I think it's really good, especially with COVID, to have like to know your neighbors, to have these deep discussions. I'm finding, it's not something that you really want to talk about what's going on in the world, but people are so excited if they find, the other day, a couple family members of mine talked to a neighbor of ours, and they found out that they were totally on the same page about what's happening in our country with the hatred for the police, what's happening also with COVID and the vaccines and everything. And this neighbor was, I think, very excited and encouraged to find out that somebody else was thinking exactly like them. And so it just gives you a sense that you're not alone.
COVID has taught us to embrace and appreciate family.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, prior to COVID, people were busy. Now they're at home eating pizza and having a grand time and loving each other more. And Annie, I'm an introvert, but our culture is unusual in the sense that people celebrate loneliness, not autonomy, but loneliness. So for example, I'm a brand. It's good to be me. And these silly Twitter posts, oh, I just got a PhD. We're so obsessed with the idea of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. No, and I agree with you. I'm an introvert myself.
I figured.
It's actually challenging for me to get out and do those things, speak with other people. And I enjoy it, but yet it's still challenging. But it is so essential to do that and to spend time with people and help them know that they're not alone.
Yeah, build social capital. So within the next 50 years from now, what do we expect? An America like Japan, women are old and lonely, men are old and lonely.
Yeah.
And people will do anything to get attention, even engaging in illicit activities.
Yes, yes. Look at even our social media today, I'm not on TikTok, but from the few clips I see floating around on the internet, it's like people are doing horrible things,
Yes.
and it just builds and builds. So they try to do something,
They will do Annie, they will do anything to get attention, even if they die. So for example, I don't know if you have been seeing the articles on Yahoo, but some young people have been dying because of their antics on TikTok and on other social media platforms. They're pranksters, and the pranks did not go as planned, and they died.
Yeah.
And today, for many, life is just pranks, having fun, and being what they call your authentic self. What is that?
Well, I mean,
Another cliche.
yeah, it's all self-focused. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, you're not really happy if you are going to be just all about me, me, me. It's when you look outwardly and help others, that's when you yourself find meaning and fulfillment.
And now we're going to discuss a topic that you're really passionate about: identity politics and education. What's going on, Annie? Why are students being taught to disregard American history and value the Aztecs, who also engaged in human sacrifice and conquered their inferiors?
Yeah, well, this is an area that, I have been very passionate about history. I love American history. I love what our country was founded on. And I think even though there may have, definitely we're humans, we're flawed, nothing's going to be perfect. But they did found a very wonderful country for us. And it really saddens me to see people trying to change that history around. And to look at everything through the lens of identity politics. Whether so-and-so had slaves or this or that. And it's a very narrow view of history. And it doesn't really help us any in understanding where we've come from. I mean, it helps us some, but there's so much more that gives us a broader sense of who we are as a people and a place. And when you throw that out, it's just no wonder we have the chaos that we have.
But Annie, why can't these teachers teach the truth? So for example, if you're going to fixate on non-European history, also tell students that in the Mali Empire, there was a king, I believe his name was Khalifa, and he killed people for fun.
Yeah.
Conquest is a part of history.
Yes, you need to tell, the other aspect of you can't just pop one, and maybe to be fair, that's what we've done, but you do have to look at all sides, the good and the bad in American history, the good and the bad in African history, the good and the bad in European, and that gives you much more of a fair, balanced approach to history. And also too, we need to learn from our mistakes. We need to learn from what people said in the past. That's one thing I love doing, is digging into the quotes of people in the past, and especially they were so wise and able to see, it seems like, in the future. So often I find things from old writers where they're describing stuff and like, that's exactly what we're going through right now. And if people had only paid attention to what they said at that time, we might not be dealing with these difficulties that we have.
So for example, Paul Gottfried, he has an article titled "The Seminole Slavery Story," and it is in reference to Joseph Cotto's new book titled "Runaway Mastered: A True Story of Slavery, Triumph, and Tragedy Beyond 1619 and 1776.
Yeah.
And they've also written on this issue. Native Americans also owned slaves.
Yes.
But that's not a popular story. It is being drilled into the brains of students that white men own slaves. And at this point, my response is, so what? Most societies throughout history have engaged in slavery, but the difference is that in the West, slavery was abolished.
Yeah.
And even obviously you want to, but let me make a last point. Even in Ethiopia, when the Ethiopians attempted to abolish slavery, it was done under the rule of Christian kings. Again, an export of the West, because Christianity became more popular in the West than in the Middle East. But you may go ahead. You're wanting to speak.
No, go ahead. That's fine.
Yeah. So Christianity is an Eastern religion, but it manifested in Western society. Religious freedom, Thomas Aquinas, Augustine, all these people, especially Augustine from North Africa, they're more popular in the West than in North Africa or the Middle East. So that's an edge Westerners have in teaching their history. Yes, it is imperfect, but they abolished slavery.
Yeah.
And that's something to be acknowledged. And even blacks who owned slaves, some of them were not necessarily nice slave owners. There's actually a story of a man who sold his children to buy his wife. I can even send you the journal. It was published by the New West Indian Guides on Academic Journal. But slavery is not unique. And when you exaggerate the role played by white people in slavery, you're actually diminishing the humanity of non-whites. Because to be human, we must engage in evil at some point. If you're only able to do good, you're not truly human.
Yes, well, we want to definitely work towards that, but yes, we're fallen creatures, and unfortunately, it seems like we sometimes even exalt like the pagan cultures as if they were solely good and stuff, but we overlook all the bad things that they did as well.
All right. Now we will divert to discuss COVID. Annie, you have an article blaming the media for COVID deaths. Why?
Well, I have been looking at COVID. I think it's a very fascinating thing right now, especially I'm fascinated by the information that is out there that just does not get out into the mainstream media. You really have to know kind of where to look, and I've tried to be very, very careful to make sure I'm looking at good, solid, legitimate sources, not just people who are like, oh, this is a conspiracy, blah, blah, stuff like that. So I've been trying to look at sources who really do their research, who seem like they're good experts, sources where like even the journal will talk about things. But unfortunately, a lot of this media they are not telling me what is really going on. And that really was driven home to me about a month ago when I saw a short little interview by a journalist called Ivory Hecker. And she had worked for Fox News, but she had lost her job because she came out and said, hey, they are suppressing a lot of the reporting that I want to do about COVID, especially about alternative treatments such as ivermectin. And she covered, I believe it was Dr. Joseph Barone.
Yeah, Joseph Varon, yes. Varon, yes.
Yes, he has given so many interviews in the last year and a half or so about COVID because he has been very successful at treating COVID, and he has done this through a variety of different drugs such as ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. And I had actually had COVID late last year, and I thankfully knew a doctor who was in private practice, and he had told me a lot of the similar things, like, hey, if you get it early and you use these different drugs, it's pretty effective at stopping it. So when I'm starting to hear this, and there's doctors out there that will say this, but they have been very much suppressed. And I think the media, it really is to blame for that, because it goes against the narrative that they've advanced. I'm not sure why. I have a guess that maybe this is what the ruling elite wants the narrative to be, and so they just fall into line with it. But yeah, I could go on and on.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with you going on and on, because we do know that COVID is serious if you're particularly ill, but it is not a death sentence. But before I continue, tell us a little about your experience with COVID-19. What happened to you?
Yeah, well, I probably actually wouldn't have even known that I had it.
Repeat what did you just say?
I probably wouldn't have even known that I had it, except for the fact that somebody alerted me that I had been with that, hey, I got COVID. He had this similar symptoms that I had. I just had a minor cold. And so I thought, oh, maybe I better get tested. So I did, and sure enough, I had it. So I would say the worst thing about it was that it was long lasting, and I was very fatigued. Now I'm younger. My mother actually ended up getting it as well. She had it a little more severe, but she's older, and but it was more like a flu. She said she's had worse flus before. She did actually end up getting treated by this doctor friend that we know, and that was very effective with the breathing issues she had had. And we're both doing very well. I'm actually very thankful I had COVID, especially since more information is coming out now all the time that the natural immunity probably is very effective, even more effective than the vaccine, or more long lasting, which seems like nobody really will talk about, but you're starting to see it a little bit more in studies, different places. So I'm thankful that is emerging. I'm thankful that I had it, because it really wasn't a terrible experience. Probably the worst thing was that you had to quarantine so long. That was the hard thing. So.
And lockdowns do not work. I keep belaboring the point, but it is still not evident to some people. The studies are numerous, ember frontiers in public health, yet when you enunciate these assertions, people make it appear as if you're the one who is crazy.
Yeah.
And small businesses have been negatively affected by these lockdowns. For what?
Yeah.
So that bureaucrats can feel good?
It just seems like the lockdowns prolong our pain. It kind of sometimes seems like, let's just get it over with. And I mean, look at Sweden. More information is coming out all the time that they basically have reached herd immunity, and they didn't lock down. They've done some vaccines, but I don't think it's been as heavy as some nations. They've probably mostly just, tried to go about their lives and accepted it. And that's really, I think, what we really have to do, it seems like, with more research coming out, that we just need to accept that it's a fact of life, and we have to try to live normally and even get the treatment for the people who do have underlying conditions, who are elderly. And a lot of times these natural treatments work. I mean, look, at ivermectin is a very cheap drug, and you can get it almost over the, I don't know if it's over the counter, but it's very cheap, and it's just almost kind of like, I don't know, public domain is the only
Well,
quite like that. But why don't they give this out? I mean, they could save many lives probably if they let people know about this, but they're not letting people know about it.
so for example, I'm actually pro-science, and in one show, I argued that a study purported the efficacy of ivermectin. Ivermectin may work for some people, but based on the present evidence, I am not in a position to recommend it, because that study was actually withdrawn. A graduate student found some errors, but the fact that one study was poorly done does not vitiate the case for ivermectin.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's something that people need to look into more. And that's the problem. If, maybe a vaccine works, but maybe these other things work too. And the more treatments you have, the better it is for everybody. But it's not really going to be helpful if you keep suppressing some. I mean, like you said, maybe it would be good for somebody, but not for somebody else. And so if you have that broad range, just life is going to be better for everybody.
Neither do I support COVID passports or mandatory vaccines. The vaccine will reduce the severity of the disease. It is not a defense. Therefore, one should choose if he's going to take the vaccine. It is improper to force people to take a vaccine that is not a defense.
Definitely.
But I like how you started the article we're discussing about on vaccines.
Okay.
David Fromm, you refer to David Fromm of the Atlantic?
Yes.
And I actually laugh. Do you know why, Annie?
Why was that?
You read David Fromm?
I don't really, but I did that article. I was like, you gotta be kidding me.
No, people like David Fromm, they appear to be intelligent, but look, David Fromm is just a part of the establishment. He repeats what elites want him to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Like Paul, every now and then will write a piece referring to the National Review, and I do read the National Review every now and then. It's not a bad publication, but Annie, I don't have the time for mainstream conservatives. Sorry.
Oh, it's good to keep up with them to know what they're advancing. So that
Yeah, yeah, but they're just laughable.
yeah. Well, I mean, it's so much these days, and it's just it feels like people don't think anymore. And I mean, I think it is good to look at the other side, but then you have to weigh their arguments and say, like, okay, is this plausible? Is this reasonable? Is this truthful? And that's what everybody should really be doing. You know, we learn to follow ourselves and just listen to who we want to, but to always be processing everything like, all right, what is true? What is good? What is, what makes sense? And I
Yes,
think that's the thing too. I feel like these days, so many people just don't have common sense anymore.
common sense is not that common.
Exactly, very much.
So the article refuting the study, it is titled Flaw Ivermectin Preprint Highlights Challenges of COVID Drug Studies, and it was published by Nature on August, the 2nd of August 2021.
Okay. I
So
haven't
people,
seen that one yet.
yes.
I have not seen that yet.
Yeah, it was. I recently saw it. I read the study before, but I wasn't familiar with this new data. I am pro science. I am not pushing an agenda. If the evidence suggests that vaccines work, then they work. If the evidence does not suggest this fact, then I don't believe in taking the vaccine. That I don't believe that I should take the vaccine. I'm only driven by the data. So, for
Yeah.
example, the evidence on facial coverings is inconclusive. And there are many studies debunking the efficacy of facial coverings. So
Yeah.
for example, you want to just get rid of masks, you have an article on that topic. Mass party, something to that effect.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was actually very interesting. I had written an article off an MIT study that came out earlier this year. And there again, it was one of those things where the people who are very trust to science came out and they seemed a little bit flabbergasted to find that people who were anti-mask were actually really
Pro science.
we're very pro-science, we're very scientific in how they arrived at those conclusions, and studying, researching, looking at things. So I think that's one of the big problems in our country today is that people just trust the experts, they don't do the digging for themselves. And those who do go and dig, unfortunately, are, I don't know if you want to say castrated or just,
Repeat what you just said.
they're very, they're pushed aside and just alienated. And they're the kooks, they're the crazies, they don't believe in science. Well, oftentimes, as the study shows, they are the ones that are looking carefully at the science and trying to weigh the facts that are out there.
Is science infallible?
Oh,
No, exactly my point. Like, I respect science to a degree.
yes.
One can use science to construct a nuclear bomb and destroy countries. One can also use science to cure diseases. Is science a god? No, it is not. So saying you trust the science doesn't even make you partially intelligent. You're just someone repeating a view you think that's intelligent or elite.
Yeah.
Yeah, trust the science. I am with science. I'm pro science. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Saying that you're pro science tells me nothing. So, for example, according to science, the climate is always changing. With or without us, the climate will change, and the effects of climate change are not uniform. No one denies climate change. Some people are skeptical of anthropogenic global warming. Again, a straw man. Leftists love they love straw men.
Yeah.
And back to your earlier point about reading broadly, you should read broadly. I read a lot of publications, but my God, I just wish that people on the mainstream right and the left would read more.
Yeah.
They're not familiar with chronicles.
Well, hopefully that'll is changing. So
Yeah, and that's a choice. Instead of reading to understand and then explain, they just say, oh no, I'm not reading, that person is a bigot.
Yeah.
He's a bigot. That there are so many people on the right I've met, especially younger people, who are fairly well read, but they have never read Paul Gottfried.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think this is something that, you know, for all of us, and we can slip into this too, but we need to be looking at different people and then and weighing what they say. Sometimes they say something really good, like that's why it's really helpful, and that's something people need to be doing. Other times, though, they may say, you know, completely other things like that's not helpful and that's really not true. So what people need to be doing today, and I think this is the problem, one of the problems in our society is that people can't seem to discern and wade through evidence anymore. They have to be told that way. And that's not that's really a result of our education system. Always being told this is what it is, this is how it is, do this, everything like that. People need to start thinking outside of the box more, and looking at and weighing the evidence for themselves.
We know, Annie, you have a big problem with the education system. That's why you want to reduce planned mediocrity. How do you plan mediocrity?
Oh boy, I mean, you know, it's just the public schools these days seem like they want to, like I said just a bit ago, they want to get everybody to be followers.
Robots.
Yes, robots. And so we need to get kids out of that type of system. And that's really what it is to be a learner. You question things, you ask questions, you explore, you investigate. So if parents can get children out of that system, and that's another blessing I think is many parents have been able to see what their schools are teaching through the online education. They've been also able to say that, hey, I can actually do this. It's not so hard to, I mean, it is challenging to people, but I think parents get overwhelmed often and feel like I'm smart enough. Well, if you can read and just stay one little step ahead of your child, you probably can homeschool very easily. And in fact, parents, that is what they are doing all the time. They're always educating their child in every aspect of life. So if they're a parent, you know, I'm pretty certain you can homeschool.
Yes, Annie, I agree with you, but raising a strong family requires vision. It does. Women have their roles, men have their roles. These roles are complementary, and children do not have authority over their parents. So, for example, the Greta Thunberg phenomenon was a disgrace. Greta is not a scientist.
Yeah.
She's not even a whiz kid. I have no interest in what Greta has to say.
Well, it's interesting to see what she comes up with. I will say that.
Yeah, like it's comic relief. So, for example, for days I looked at that Greta video of her shouting, "How dare you! How dare you!" Yeah, I was just like, okay, a little 15-year-old who's creeping me out. But then again, Greta is not a little girl. She's designed to look like that. She's around 16. That's a fairly mature teenager. And then she's from an acting background. Furthermore, her family isn't poor, so we don't even know if this phenomenon is real or if it was orchestrated. But
Yeah,
what we do know is that Greta is taken seriously. And
Yeah.
we're told by a little girl that we should forget the fairy tale of growth. Okay, then. So this is someone, she has never managed a business. She's not a scientist. She's not a whiz kid. But we should believe her. Like I've read people saying, Greta knows better. It's a crazy culture, Annie.
It is. And I think part of the whole Greta Thunberg thing is we have trained ourselves to be so based.
To be so what?
We've trained ourselves to be so emotionally based. And so her argument is based purely on emotion, and you know, it was for the children. Well, you know, the facts don't always really back that up. And so if we weren't so based on emotions and everything, then we wouldn't be having these problems.
Yeah, but I really enjoy our conversation, Annie. What should be the title of
Oh,
our discussion? What should be the title?
well, that's a good thing. I am not very strong on titles always. I'm trying to work on it. Hmm. I don't know. Maybe something about tradition.
This is really funny. Female Ben Shapiro slams feminism. Yeah, I like for me, I like to give my videos catchy titles. So Ben Shapiro slams feminism. People are going to read that.
Go ahead.
Hmm? What did you say?
Yes, go ahead if you want to.
Yeah. Female Ben Shapiro slams feminism. But Annie, who are some of your favorite writers?
Oh boy. Well, I love Whitaker Chambers' Witness.
Oh, no, I'm talking about living writers. Many of the good writers
Yeah.
are dead, so, but it's hard. It's hard to find a living writer. I know.
Oh boy, that's a tricky question. I'm trying to think. Yeah, a lot of my favorite writers are probably dead. So.
Yeah. Well, living right. I like Paul Gottfried. He's a good living writer. I like Richard Posner. I like and Herman Hoppe. I like the scientific research of Dutton and Woodley.
Okay.
And I like Walter Block.
Uh-huh.
But many of my favorite writers are no longer with us.
Yes.
So
one of the writers, I don't think I mentioned this earlier, that I have really enjoyed in Chronicles is Anthony Askland.
yeah, I love Anthony Easterlin too. And Stephen Baskerville.
Oh yes, I do enjoy Stephen Baskerville stuff a lot too.
Yes, he's quite a force.
Yes.
Stevens. And then I write for Chronicles.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you for your contributions. You have touched some very challenging topics.
Yes.
And gone over well on the site. So
yeah. But you know, Annie, I think I have credibility. So I write for Chronicles and some publications that are not mainstream. So my piece on IQ was published elsewhere. Yeah, I found a publisher, but I really wanted Chronicles to publish the IQ piece. Like,
well, we have several ideas, and so I think it was kind of joint. Well, I don't think we'll quite do this one right now.
Yeah, like I even sent the IQ piece elsewhere, and they couldn't accommodate it either. But one publication that's on the so-called dissident right, they published the IQ piece.
Okay. On another place.
Yeah, but I look forward to the day when even Chronicles can get more radical.
More radical.
Yes.
I will pass that along to the others on the editorial team.
Yes, yeah. But I like to egg on. I like to boost Paul because Paul is older than us, but I think he has lots of energy. So I like to say, okay, you're a Renaissance man, but he just laughed because like, okay, I'm pretty old. Like Lipton doesn't know what he's talking about. Like Paul doesn't expect to become a Ben Shapiro anytime soon.
Paul is a sweetie. He was just in the office a few weeks ago, and it was nice to have him here. So.
Yeah. He writes his article and he's just living his life. Very pessimistic. He's like, I'm nothing else of substance will occur. I'm just living my life. Yeah, you really can't be bothered.
So.
Yeah, but as I have said to him and to others, it is the loss of the conservative movement that is not more popular.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. That's why I interviewed him. He was one of my first guests because to start a channel like this and not interview Paul would make me a waste.
Yeah. A walking encyclopedia.
Yes, but it was a pleasure to speak to you, Annie. I love your articles, and I think that you may like my work.
Thank you for writing those too, Lipton.
Yes. So we'll talk again and continue to correspond. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.